Discover the incredible 5 most shocking ancient Rome spectacles that transformed humanity forever. Sarah stared at the old, weathered journal spread out before her, rich with stories of ancient Rome's gladiators and the people who cheered for blood. Each entry buzzed with a pulse that mirrored the life rushing hopelessly around her family's disapproval pressing in, each moment of silence at the dinner table thick with judgment, as her father's disapproving gaze dismissed her every dream as fluff. To him, history was of little value in the world of finance. It wouldn't help pay the bills, wouldn't secure a future. Her heart raced as she wondered if he would even hear the reverberations of her passion echo against the walls of their home. Could she ever be anything more than a disappointment in his eyes? As a history teacher in small-town Virginia, Sarah fought an uphill battle, attempting to breathe life into ancient cultures for students whose senses dulled at the sound of dates and timelines. She saw herself reflected in the pages of her grandfather's journals. There, amidst the annals of conquest and chaos, she found her own struggles and intense yearning to educate and inspire versus her family's relentless vision for her life that revolved around practical careers. She could almost hear the ticking clock of expectations counting down to her crossroad, a choice between loyalty to her family and fidelity to herself. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the chilling news that her family planned to sell the family home, her grandfather's cherished sanctuary, as if it were nothing but another piece of real estate. It felt like a dagger, sharp and swift, twisting deeper with each passing moment as she remembered scripting her dreams on the very walls they planned to abandon. Could she allow her grandfather's spirit, a flame of intellectual curiosity, to be extinguished for fear? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Torn between her family's practicality and her desire to honor her grandfather's legacy, Sarah wrestled with waves of anxiety. What if the stories she uncovered, the secrets woven throughout her grandfather's life, tied to his scholarship funding that had fallen prey to political pressure, were to slip through her fingers? As revelations lurked just beneath the surface, the anticipation strangled her mind. Would revealing the truth bring clarity or tear open wounds too deep to heal? In that dim light of her cluttered office, surrounded by scraps of paper bearing her thoughts, she felt a stirring confidence pushing against the mantle of familial expectation. But as she prepared to unveil her findings at the community center, the weight of the unknown gripped her, uncertainty coursed through her veins like an intoxicating poison. Would she conquer her fear, or retreat into silence as she had so many times before? As she took a step forward, her heart thundered in her chest, poised on the brink of transformation or despair. The air felt heavy and taut, almost electric, as she raised her hand to the microphone. Either the audience would embrace her story or echo her father's disbelief. In that moment, she inhaled, the world pressing in sharply around her, and with an urgent need to reveal the truth, she opened her mouth to speak, ready to draw her breath, facing the precipice of change. The sound of her voice pierced through the thick layers of anticipation, each word slipping from her lips as though they were both a release and a challenge. It wasn't just about sharing facts or dates, it was about a legacy that needed resurrecting, a call to awaken the embers of intellectual curiosity in a room filled with faces that mirrored her own fears of judgment. As she spoke, she felt the chamber's energy shift, a surge of empowerment coursing through her. The stories of gladiators and emperors unfolded in vivid detail, and she wove in her own struggles those tender familial ties that felt increasingly fragile. She narrated her grandfather's life, not merely as a collection of dates but as a rich tapestry of perseverance, sacrifice, and unyielding pursuit of knowledge despite the world's harsh realities. The audience, initially stiff and skeptical, began to lean in, a collective breath of engagement hanging palpably in the air. Sarah noticed eyebrows raised in surprise and intrigue transforming their rigid expressions into softer curiosity. Enraptured, she realized she was not just speaking to an audience, she was inviting them into her heart, unearthing vulnerability layered with insistent strength. In turn, her fears began to melt away. Yet, a familiar shadow loomed at the edge of her thoughts, her father's disapproving voice echoing in the recesses of her mind, questioning the value of what she believed was meaningful. Would she ever bridge this chasm between their worlds? Would he, too, ever see the worth in the narratives she felt compelled to share? With every new detail she unveiled, anticipation darkened with doubt. These thoughts propelled her forward, however. She sensed that sharing this part of herself might be the key to unlocking generational understanding. As the presentation progressed, she roped in recent discoveries like how the unstable political climate led to her grandfather losing his scholarship. This revelation felt monumental, and it wrapped around her like a shield of righteousness, allowing her to confront their realities with newfound clarity. The audience shifted again, nods began to accompany her words as though they too felt the gravity of what exploring the past meant for the future. When she finally finished, silence hung for a beat longer than expected, before the applause erupted, resonating with the echoed commitment to her grandfather's legacy. But as she stood there, heart racing, another wave crashed over her. This was only the beginning. The uncertainty of her family dynamics continued to hover like a dark cloud. Once the applause faded, Sarah felt exhaustion creep in, a bittersweet cocktail compounded by the yearning for validation. Suddenly, she was reminded of her earlier question: could her father ever comprehend the depth of what history meant to her, what it could mean to their family? Determined to answer that question, she made a decision, a promise to herself to uncover and embrace deeper truths about her family history that had been buried in silence. If she could understand the complexities of her grandfather's life, perhaps she could forge a connection, create a dialogue instead of a divide. And so, with a resolute heart, Sarah pondered what her next step would be. The journals still whispered secrets, and as she gathered them close, she realized the road ahead was laden with both challenges and untold possibilities. She needed to confront her father, to present her vision for a future that honored the past. The time had come to face not only her family's expectations but also the conflict within herself, as she prepared to unveil the stories that once seemed too daunting to reveal. What revelations lay in wait would soon unfold, as history demanded her voice more earnestly than ever before. Would she have the courage to bridge the gap between her convictions and her family's aspirations? The daylight filtered into her small study, casting soft pools of light across the scattered journals. Each leather-bound book was soaked in the whispers of her family's past, holding stories that longed to resurface. Sarah flipped through the pages, the unearthed ink intertwining with her own quest for understanding. In this moment of quiet reflection, she felt a compulsion to extract deeper truths from her grandfather's narrative, truths that could perhaps carve a bridge to her father, if only she could find the right angle. But what about her own story? This journey of historical exploration had begun with an external focus, yet now it seemed imperative that she also delve into her own identity. The power it held transformed not just her perception of family history but the very essence of her self-image. With every revelation about her grandfather's trials, her understanding of resilience deepened. However, the looming confrontation with her father weighed heavily on her shoulders. The thought struck her: was she merely a vessel for her grandfather's legacy, or did she also deserve to claim her own narrative? To solidify her newfound resolve, she sat down, pen in hand, and began writing her own history alongside her grandfather's. What challenges had she faced? How did she overcome her self-doubt to stand before an audience, bearing her soul? Each stroke of the pen served as a declaration that her experiences were equally worthy of exploration and acknowledgement. This dual narrative could act as a pillar of strength when she finally approached her father. It wasn't just her grandfather's legacy she carried, it was her own. Days passed, each filled with reflection and moments spent deciphering the faded ink and worn pages. As Sarah absorbed the lessons from her grandfather's struggles, she gained clarity on the burdens he carried, allowing her to feel compassion rather than bitterness toward her father's dismissive attitude. A striking revelation surfaced: her father's disapproval might stem not from a lack of belief in her abilities but from unrecognized fear and disappointment rooted in his own past. This insight transformed her apprehension into an understanding she had not expected. Perhaps this was the connection they needed. Emboldened by these discoveries, she devised her approach for the impending talk with her father. Instead of confronting him about his views, she would instead invite him into a dialogue, a shared exploration of their narratives. If she could show him how history cycles through the generations, perhaps he might begin to resonate with her ambitions and aspirations. The thought invigorated her. With the journals tucked securely under her arm, she moved to the kitchen, finding her father lingering over his morning coffee. He looked up, his expression inscrutable, and for a moment, fear gripped her gut. Nothing about this felt easy. The distance they cultivated loomed large, yet she was determined not to let it smother this opportunity. "Dad, can we talk?" Her voice trembled, then steadied. It was a simple request, yet it carried the weight of generations. This was at the moment in which she would invite her father into her world while bridging the gaps that had long divided them. As he nodded, Sarah felt the pulse of her heart quicken. In sharing her grandfather's story alongside her own, she knew she needed to illuminate not just the past but also the potential for their shared future. But would her father be willing to step into that conversation? Would he embrace not just her narrative, but those intertwined legacies that shaped them both? Uncertainty echoed as she prepared to face not only her father's unyielding beliefs but also the complexity of her evolving identity. The dialogues forged in this moment would undoubtedly shape the course of their relationship, and as they sat down together, the urgency of her resolve only intensified. The stories that awaited their unveiling were loaded with risk and potential, setting the stage for a transformative exchange that could change everything. Would she have the courage to bridge the gap, or would they remain estranged by unspoken fears? The silence between them stretched thin, fraught with the unspoken words that had accumulated over years of divergence. Sarah felt the weight of her grandfather's legacy pressing down as she glanced at her father, searching his face for any signs of receptiveness, any flicker of connection. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about our family history," she began, her voice steadying as she forged ahead. "About Grandpa, his struggles and triumphs. There's so much I've learned that I want to share with you." Her father's brow furrowed, but Sarah pressed on. She flipped open a journal, the pages brimming with her grandfather's stories of resilience. "Here, look at this," she urged, pointing to an entry that described her grandfather standing up for his beliefs, despite overwhelming opposition. He faced incredible challenges, yet he always pushed through. He leaned closer, curiosity mingling with skepticism. "What does this have to do with you, Sarah?" "Everything," she replied, feeling the surge of urgency in her words. "Understanding his journey helps me understand mine. I've faced my own fears too, Dad. I've struggled to find my voice, to stand in front of people and share who I am, just like he did." A flicker of recognition crossed his face, but Sarah knew she needed to dig deeper to reach the core of their connection. She contoured her narrative to reflect her father's experiences, overlaying their lives as intricately as layers of ink. "Do you remember the time the school held that public speaking contest? I was terrified, convinced I would fail," she continued, meeting her father's gaze. "But I remembered Grandpa's stories. I thought about how hard he fought to express himself in a world that often silenced him. And I realized something: his resilience was in me too." Her father remained still, reflecting on her words, and a dam of emotions threaded through Sarah's own heart. Was this the moment? Would he understand her struggles as reflections of his own history? "Sarah," he spoke softly, almost questioning, "it's not that I don't see your talent. It's complicated. Life has a way of making you doubt yourself. Just as it did for you." She challenged gently, urging him to confront his own buried vulnerabilities. "What are you afraid of? Losing me? Or perhaps your disappointment in yourself for not supporting my path sooner?" He hesitated, contemplating her words with a furrowed brow. The fear that had gripped her at the onset of this conversation began to dissipate, replaced by resolution. Perhaps her father's silent battles were linked to the very fears she'd been grappling with. "I see your drive, your passion," he finally admitted. But I want to protect you from failure, to spare you the pain I've endured. I appreciate that, but I need to own my journey, Dad. Failures are part of it. My grandfather didn't shy away from challenges because they were daunting, he faced them head-on. Maybe there's a lesson there for both of us. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, both an invitation and a challenge. Each revelation unearthed layers of misunderstanding, revealing the crisscrossing legacies of struggle and survival within their family. Her father's gaze softened, and in that moment of vulnerability, she felt a crack in the wall that separated them began to form. Perhaps this was the turning point they desperately needed, the foundation upon which they could rebuild their relationship. Sarah, he started, a tremor in his voice, maybe I've been too protective. Perhaps I've failed to see. But before he could finish, she held up her hand, sensing the delicate nature of their exploration. Let us not rush this. We have all of this history to unpack. Together. As they sat in the tension of this unfolding narrative, the barriers they had constructed over the years felt less insurmountable. They were not just echoes of the past but ringing affirmations of resilience, hope, and evolving identity. Yet just as Sarah felt their conversation propel forward, an unsettling thought clung at the fringes of her mind. Would her father truly be able to relinquish his protective instincts and embrace the unknown? Was this moment merely a prelude to greater challenges that lay ahead? The unsettling questions lingered within her, setting the stage for the deeper confrontations they would face. Would the revelations lead them to a new understanding, or would the walls of fear end up thwarting their fragile connection? In the stillness that followed, Sarah's mind raced with uncharted possibilities. Would her father's newfound openness translate into genuine support, or was it merely a fleeting moment? Now that they were poised on the edge of discovery, the next step seemed precarious. She took a deep breath, feeling the subtle pulse of anxiety coursing through her. Dad, I want you to understand my vision. I'm ready to take bold steps. I've already thought about applying to that public speaking workshop, she asserted, leaning into her conviction. As the words tumbled out, she felt both exhilaration and trepidation. What if he dismissed it? What if he analyzed her ambition through the lens of his fears? Her father's brow knitted again, but the skepticism was tempered with curiosity. A workshop? One focused on public speaking? His tone betrayed a blend of support and lingering doubt, as if weighing the risk against potential disappointment. Yeah, Sarah said, her resolve strengthening with each word. Just like Grandpa, I want to harness my voice. I want to learn how to articulate my thoughts and experiences in a way that resonates with others. She saw the spark of recognition in her father's eyes, the slant of his expression indicating he was rekindling some of his own dreams buried beneath the weight of practicality. Do you think you can handle it? He asked, veering from doubt to a question's shared sentiment. Speaking in front of people can be terrifying. It's easy to trip over your words or lose your train of thought. I can't let fear dictate my path, Dad. I think about Grandpa, who faced insurmountable odds to express himself. I want to channel that courage, to uncover my own. I don't want to hold back because of fear of failure, she replied, urgency embedding every letter of her response. His eyes softened, and for a moment, Sarah believed she could see the flicker of a future where they could both express themselves freely. Yet, an unsettling knot tightened in her stomach. Would he be able to see her journey as a distinct path, separate from his own? You're passionate, he said slowly, each word digging deeper into the soil of their conversation. But you know I always wanted the best for you. I've seen too many people fail. It's a hurt that stays with you. I get that you want to protect me, she interjected, the weight of his concern pressing down like an anchor. But what I really need is for you to trust me. I have to walk my own path, even if it's fraught with uncertainty. Silence filled the space between them once more, but it was electric, vibrating with their shared past and uncertain future. Sarah felt her heart racing, each tick of the clock underscored the urgency of her convictions. All right, her father finally conceded, the wariness retreating as he took a measured breath. If you want to pursue this workshop, I can't stop you. But it terrifies me. Just as much as it excites me. Allow that fear to be a motivator, Dad, Sarah said, conscious of the emerging connection, but determined to guide it. I want us to navigate our fears together. This is about taking risks for growth, embracing the hard truths just like Grandpa did. Their conversation began to peel back layers of history, a healing dialogue nestled in the uncharted territory of vulnerability. If they could both commit to facing their insecurities head-on, perhaps they could both find clarity. However, the prospect of the workshop loomed large in Sarah's mind, accompanied by a subsequent thought that curled its fingers into her consciousness. If she stepped onto this stage, not only would she reveal her voice, but perhaps also confront long-buried fears that could resonate with her father in unexpected ways. As she prepared to take the next step, the weight of her grandfather's legacy felt heavier than ever. Would she truly have the courage to share her voice in a public arena? Or was this merely a step toward another hurdle yet to reveal itself? The possibilities fluttered like autumn leaves in her mind as they loomed. Just as they began to forge deeper connections. Would the challenges ahead pull them apart once again? The anticipation of the uncertain path ahead ignited a flicker of trepidation alongside excitement. What lay beyond the threshold of her newfound determination? As the daylight dimmed and uncertainty loomed, Sarah found herself standing at a threshold. The prospect of the public speaking workshop filled her mind with both hope and dread. Each imagined scenario played out vividly: what it would feel like to stand before an audience, how her words might flow or falter. As she paced in her small bedroom, the familiar walls seemed both comforting and suffocating, encapsulating her struggle. She decided to take action. The first step was simple: registering for the workshop online. But with every keystroke, doubt crept in like a shadow. What if she was making a mistake? What if she bombed, completely unrecognizable to the confident version of herself she hoped to become? Sarah hesitated, her finger hovering over the submit button. No one would be watching over her shoulder, no one to validate her decision, just her and the vast unknown. Finally, she pressed the key and winced at the sudden finality of it. The registration confirmed, she felt both exhilarated and unmoored. The rush of adrenaline met her swirling thoughts like a cyclone, pushing her to confront the underlying truth. She had to lean into the discomfort rather than evade it. In the days that followed, she threw herself into preparation. She researched public speaking techniques obsessively, watching videos and practicing in front of the mirror. Each morning, she would wake up, take a deep breath, and recite affirmations as her reflection stared back. There was power in that vessel, she just needed to discover how to harness it. However, each evening brought with it a creeping anxiety. Her father's words echoed loud in her head: "I've seen too many people fail." The thought gnawed at her resolve during moments of stillness. She understood the fear that accompanied vulnerability. It was a fear she shared. To confront it head-on meant risking rejection, risking judgment. But above all, she had to confront her intrinsic fear of inadequacy. Yet, in her quiet moments, Sarah found clarity. For every ounce of fear, there also existed an undercurrent of hope and potential. She thought about her grandfather again, recognizing that he dared to voice his opinions in a time when silence was expected. Challenging his legacy felt like an act of defiance, but also a necessary tribute. In the midst of this whirlwind of thoughts, an unexpected wave of energy surged through her. She felt the need to share her preparations with her father, to show him the earnestness behind her endeavor. Their last conversation loomed large in her mind. She could almost hear his cautious curiosity urging her onward. "I found something to share with you," she said one evening, cutting through the silence that enveloped their house. He looked up from his newspaper, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "I registered for that public speaking workshop we talked about." The words spilled forth, buoyed by an unexpected confidence. "I want to show you how committed I am." He nodded, a mixture of pride and worry crossing his face. "That's a big step, Sarah." "I can't help but worry, but it sounds like you're determined." "Just remember, you're not alone in this. In that moment, shared recognition anchored them both. They were wrestlers in a complex dance of faith, theirs intertwined with fear but underlined by a budding understanding. Reflecting on his words brought her a sense of calm, as if they were as much a team as they were individuals navigating distinct yet complementary journeys. But beyond this moment of solidarity lay the uncertainty of the upcoming workshop. Each speaking session would be a battle against the self-doubt she felt permeating her mind. Would she be able to convey her vision clearly? Would the audience resonate with her experiences, or would she merely be met with silence? As the date approached, Sarah felt the fluttering intensity of both excitement and fear escalated within her. Each day was a step into unknown territory. The fragile thread of courage she had begun to weave would soon be tested, stretching tighter. The time had come for her to confront her vulnerabilities. Would she refine her voice into a tool of empowerment, or would it quaver beneath the weight of expectation? The anticipation of the workshop loomed ever larger, beckoning her toward uncharted waters where growth and fear might collide in an alluring yet terrifying dance. What awaited her when she took that stage could forever reshape her understanding of self. The morning of the workshop dawned with a strange blend of anticipation and trepidation. Sarah awoke earlier than usual, the light filtering through her window bringing an unexpected brightness to her turbulent thoughts. This was her day, a pivotal moment she had worked so hard to prepare for. Yet as she dressed, her hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm facade she tried to project. Standing in front of the mirror once more, she rehearsed her introduction aloud, each word feeling foreign yet familiar at the same time. She scrutinized her reflection, willing herself to see not just the timid girl she often felt like, but the courageous woman she aspired to be. Today, she would embody that strength, even if it took every ounce of her willpower. As she drove to the venue, the world blurred around her. The rhythmic thrum of her heart, thumping with a nervous urgency, drowned out the external noise. Memories of her father's worried face, her grandfather's legacy, and the relentless doubt clouding her mind collided, forcing her to regroup her thoughts. What if she didn't belong here? What if she fell flat on her face? No, she whispered under her breath, jarring herself from the spiraling negativity. I belong here. Upon entering the workshop, she found herself enveloped in a diverse crowd of aspiring speakers. Each person moved with their own mixtures of energy and anxiety, a collective tapestry of similar struggles and hopes. It was in that moment, surrounded by others who felt as unsteady as she did, that realization began to dawn on her. This was not merely about individual performance, it was a shared journey of vulnerability and growth. As the facilitator commenced the session, Sarah listened intently to the strategies being shared, her mind absorbing new perspectives. Techniques in pacing, intonation, audience engagement, every morsel of information felt like a tool being added to her burgeoning arsenal. The knowledge ignited a flicker of confidence in her chest, and with every new lesson, she could feel her fear dissipating just a little more. Then came the moment everyone had been dreading, the first speaking round. When her name was called, a familiar surge of panic coursed through her veins. She felt the room tilt slightly, and for a heartbeat, she contemplated retreating back into obscurity. But on the heels of that impulse, a stronger, almost primal urge pushed her forward. She stepped to the front of the room, grasping the microphone tightly as if it were a lifeline. Her mind swirled in chaos. What if she forgot her lines? What if they laughed at her? But as she opened her mouth, words began tumbling out. The carefully crafted sentences she had rehearsed were not merely recitations, they became a tapestry woven from her experiences and aspirations. The audience responded, nodding eyebrows in empathy, nodding in understanding, and even offering soft smiles that bolstered her resolve. For the first time, Sarah realized that the raw honesty in her voice resonated with them. She was no longer just speaking to convey facts or strategies, she was sharing a piece of herself. As the session concluded, and applause rippled through the room, Sarah felt the weight of her self-doubt begin to lift. This was just the beginning of a long journey. The fear that had once paralyzed her transformed into determination. She had confronted her insecurities and emerged from the crucible of that stage, ignited by the courage that had been buried within her. Yet, just as she began to bask in this newfound confidence, a nagging question surfaced: what transformations awaited her beyond this workshop? Would the anxieties she had confronted truly fade away, or would they haunt her the next time she stood before an audience? The true test of her growth was still to come, and with that thought, anticipation tinged with dread curled its fingers around her heart. What unforeseen challenges would now emerge on her path to self-discovery? The exhilaration from her performance lingered in the air like the fading notes of a haunting melody, but it was soon intertwined with the sharp edges of uncertainty. Sarah stepped down from the stage, her heart still racing, but as the applause echoed in her ears, a lingering question gnawed at her: had she truly overcome the shadows of her self-doubt, or was this merely a fleeting moment of bravery? She ruminated on the faces in the audience. They had shared a connection, a glimpse of her authenticity, and yet a voice in her told her that this was the calm before a tempest. The workshop had been a safe haven, shielded from real-world stakes. What if her next audience was not as forgiving? What if they saw through her veneer of confidence? As her peers began to chatter excitedly about their experiences, buoyed by adrenaline, Sarah felt a twinge of isolation. While they shared their triumphs, tales of personal growth and emotional breakthroughs, a familiar fear curled in the back of her mind. She wasn't ready for the spotlight outside this insulated environment. The facilitator, noticing her reticence, approached her with a warm smile. "What was your biggest takeaway from today?" he asked, genuine curiosity sparkling in his eyes. It was an innocent question, but also a challenge, a moment to solidify her progress. I felt connected. Like I could really share my story," she replied, her voice steadying with each word. Yet, immediately, doubt cascaded over her. Was that enough? Connection is powerful, he noted. Remember, it's not just about the words, it's how you make people feel. Harness that. As Sarah watched him walk away, her pulse quickened with the realization that she was on the brink of something significant. The thrill of connection she had felt was intoxicating, yet it also brought the weight of responsibility. How would she nurture this deepening relationship with her audience in the future? Driving home, she replayed the day's moments over and over like a film, each frame reminding her of the stakes involved. This feeling of empowerment was exciting, but also terrifying. Could she maintain this connection in different settings? What techniques would be effective? The creeping shadow of self-doubt began to swirl more aggressively within her, rearing its head as she approached her apartment. To combat it, she made a decision, a promise to herself. Every week, she would find an opportunity to speak. It didn't have to be in front of a large audience, a small gathering of friends, perhaps even a local club meeting, any situation where she could express herself and develop her skills. With her mind set, Sarah felt a surge of commitment wash over her. If she wanted transformation, she needed to face the discomfort head-on. The fear that gripped her was not a foe to be banished, but a part of the journey she needed to learn to navigate. That evening, after a long day of reflection, as she sat at her kitchen table filled with coarse notes and journals, she stumbled upon a section of her journal dedicated to her dreams and aspirations. The words she had written months ago seemed foreboding now. The fears they encapsulated were familiar yet distant. This was no longer a fantasy. She had tasted the thrill of speaking. "Tomorrow, I'll choose courage," she thought with determination, jotting down a plan for her first real speaking opportunity. There was power in that choice, an affirmation that she was more than the timid girl she had been. But just as she opened her laptop to research local venues, her phone buzzed with a message that changed the course of her resolve entirely. It was from a former colleague, inviting her to share her story at a significant professional gathering in 2 weeks. A mix of excitement and dread shot through her. This was the challenge she had been seeking. But could she truly step into that arena, where the stakes were amplified, and the audience's expectations higher? The moment of decision loomed before her: accept the opportunity and leap into the unknown, or play it safe and deny herself growth. The choice hovered in the air, urging her forward into the depths of uncertainty with a promise of potential. What would she decide? The decision weighed heavily on Sarah, pulling her in two opposing directions. Accepting the invitation felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, exhilarating yet terrifying. What awaited her beyond that leap could redefine her both personally and professionally. As her mind spun with possibilities, a contrasting tension twisted inside her, self-doubt battling against the flicker of ambition. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering above the screen. Accepting the invitation would mean publicly sharing her vulnerabilities, exposing her narrative before an audience expecting polished perfection. As she contemplated hitting send, she could almost hear the echoing doubts. What if she floundered? What if her story wasn't compelling enough? But alongside those doubts was an enticing vision of who she might become, a speaker who could captivate, inspire, and connect. The words of her workshop facilitator returned to her, "Harness that connection." Like embers igniting a fire, they fueled her desire to conquer her fears. With an unusual resolve, she pushed the doubts aside and typed a response. "I would be honored to share my story." As the message was sent off into the digital ether, an electrifying jolt surged through her. There was no turning back now. The commitment had been made, but uncertainty still lurked, tightening its grip around her heart. Over the next several days, Sarah enveloped herself in preparation. She began outlining her story, focusing on moments of growth and connection that could resonate with her audience. What was a personal journey could also be a universal experience, rich with lessons learned and insights gained. As she dissected her own narrative, she unearthed hidden layers she hadn't acknowledged before. Journal entries became her tool for honing her voice. The act of writing itself was therapeutic and revealing, each stroke of the pen breathed life into her story. She discovered unexpected competencies and ability to critically analyze her experiences and frame them in a way that could inspire others. Her personal triumphs and struggles transformed from mere memories to powerful lessons that were worth sharing. Despite her progress, the specter of performance anxiety loomed larger than life. She established a series of mini-practices, speaking aloud in the mirror, recording her speeches, and seeking feedback from trusted friends. Each practice session was an act of defiance against her fears, a small but significant victory that helped chip away at her self-doubt. Yet, for all the preparation, a persistent undercurrent of anxiety remained. The night before the gathering brought a stark clarity. Sarah lay awake, her mind racing. Even as the clock ticked away, she was flooded by a sense of impending confrontation. Was she really ready? Could she withstand the scrutiny of sharp eyes and discerning minds? In that moment, she confronted a pivotal truth: the fear of failure was a part of the journey, just as much as the exhilarating promise of success. When dawn broke, with its soft light seeping through her window, Sarah felt a familiar but invigorating mix of trepidation and excitement. This was her moment not just to share a story but to claim her identity as a speaker. Fortified by the learning and growth she had embraced, she envisioned her audience. As she pictured their faces, she asked herself, what would she want them to feel? What impact did she hope her words would have? There, she found her focus not on the fear, but on the connection she could foster in that shared space. But just as she began to gather her nerves, another message blinked on her phone. A colleague warned of a controversial guest speaker set to attend the gathering. The implications of this surprise loomed over her like a storm cloud, compounding her internal struggle. Would she still have the confidence to take the stage with such unexpected pressure in the mix? The stakes had just risen higher. What would be her next move in a world where confidence needed to be constructed amidst chaos? The day had finally arrived, but the anticipation Sarah had felt was now tangled with a knot of apprehension. The news of a controversial guest speaker attending the gathering churned anxiety in her stomach. Would this unexpected variable overshadow her efforts? As she stood before the mirror, she caught her reflection. Instead of the confident speaker she had been rehearsing to become, she saw a young woman ensnared by doubts. But in that moment of uncertainty, she remembered countless truths she had unearthed: her journey, her grandfather's struggles, and the voice she was cultivating. She was more than the anxious girl frozen by fear, she was a storyteller on the cusp of connection. As she donned her professional attire and applied her favorite lipstick, Sarah held on to a growing sense of empowerment. In her heart, she knew this was about more than just a presentation. It was about sharing her narrative to forge links between experience and understanding, legacy and aspiration. Arriving at the venue, she was taken aback by the buzz of chatter in the air. Familiar faces greeted her, offering supportive smiles, while the buzz regarding the controversial guest set an unease simmering in the backdrop. The other speakers were shaping their narratives around fear and resilience, but as she listened, Sarah felt a departure from her fears. She grounded herself in her intention to create meaningful connections with her audience, to evoke shared feelings. It was almost invigorating to notice how the energy in the room swelled, morphing anxiety into something richer. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward when it was her turn. The spotlight felt both heavy and illuminating, charging her words with purpose. She looked at the audience and saw faces waiting for a story to unfold. It was time to turn vulnerability into strength. "Good evening everyone," she began, her voice unwavering. "Today, I'm here not only to share my story but to invite you all to reflect on the untold narratives that shape us." With every word, she felt her heart beat in synchrony with the pulse of the room. As she delved deep into her personal and familial experiences, she saw the faces around her shift, eyebrows raised, heads nodding, eyes glistening with recognition. They listened, not merely for information but to connect. Her narrative, the struggles for voice similar to her grandfather's, the tension with her father's expectations, and her journey towards personal empowerment began to resonate. Each revelation lifted her further from the doubts that had haunted her. There came a moment when she shared her fears surrounding this very presentation, opening the door for vulnerability. She painted the uncertainty that had emerged surrounding the surprise of the controversial guest, inviting the audience to see her not as a flawless speaker but as a fellow traveler navigating shared human experiences. They laughed at parts where her confidence wavered, and empathized with her struggles. For the first time, she truly communicated not just facts but feelings. As she spoke about her commitment to embracing the discomfort and facing her fears, she felt a powerful realization wash over her. A profound connection had formed. The audience was no longer distanced by title or expectation, they were comrades, unified in the journey of overcoming their own anxieties. Their collective energy was enveloping, exhilarating. After her speech concluded, an eruption of applause filled the room, tangible and vibrant, a balm for her frayed nerves. Yet, she knew this applause was not merely for her words, but for lighting a common thread within them all. This was not the end, it was a pivotal moment toward understanding and acceptance, a leap that had consequences far beyond the stage. As she stepped down, her heart steadied, echoing with joy rather than dread. The room felt electric. A few audience members came to her, sharing their own experiences and gratitude for her honesty. She could hear the excitement in their voices, enthusiastic connection sparking the once considered inaccessible ground she had been wary to tread. But the most affirming moment arrived an hour later, when her father appeared at the venue. Tension danced within her, but he approached with vulnerability in his eyes. "I didn't know you felt this way, but I see you now. I'm proud of you," he said, a smile breaking the solemn line of his lips. That connection, this moment of recognition, transformed everything. It was a shared understanding, a redefinition of their relationship forged in this new light. In that space, the fears that had once suffocated her were frozen in time as she acknowledged a profound achievement. The culmination of her journey, rooted in countless nights spent wrestling with her identity and voice, had sparked a slew of possibilities. Sarah left the venue that evening carrying not just the applause but also the kindling of transformation. Through the forge of fears, her platform had become a testament to resilience, and as she turned to her father, she knew this connection was the closure she had secretly sought, recognizing her worth and the mutual understanding with him. The workshop, the speech, those transformative connections were but stepping stones toward a broader purpose, one that required her to continue exploring who she was meant to be and how far her voice could reach. Facing the world outside, she took a deep breath. This was her moment, cultivated into existence by conviction. The journey was just beginning, and she was ready to navigate it with unwavering pride. This time, as she looked forward, the horizon shimmered with the colors of possibility, brighter than any shadows may have threatened. She resolved to channel both the spirit of her grandfather and her own burgeoning legacy into the world, knowing its demands but valuing the importance of her own voice more than ever. Are you inspired by Sarah's transformation? If you found this story meaningful, subscribe immediately to our channel so you won't miss more exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep our community thriving. Comment below with your reactions or theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion.